So this is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy. Today's lesson is another special lesson. Today's lesson is 3 steps to take us from blah, blah, blah to being vivid. The 3 steps that we need to take. So I'd like to start out today by thinking that it's really all about the bridge. And what I mean by that is sometimes I think all of us can realize that we are in a world which is very loud and very busy and very convoluted, and it can be very, very difficult to be heard well or to make our own messages clear. And what we really want to do is go to a world where things really are much clearer and where we can hear each other and we can see exactly what each other is talking about. So when I say it's all about the bridge, what I really mean is I want to take us from this world all the way over to this world. And what we really want to do today is build a bridge that's going to be able to take us from the one to the other. Now, the other thing that's kind of exciting about it and why I draw the bridge the way I do is, of course, as all of you know, I live here in San Francisco. And when I talk about it being all about the bridge, there's another bridge that I'm talking about because today is the 75th anniversary of the lovely Golden Gate Bridge that spans the bay across San Francisco. And of course, around the world, this by many people is considered a really beautiful architectural landmark, and there's been a huge celebration in San Francisco the last couple of days to celebrate the 75th birthday of our beloved Golden Gate Bridge, and there's been a lot of fireworks and there's been a lot of excitement. And so when I talk about the bridge, I mean, yes, the bridge to take us from confusion to clarity, and also the bridge that takes me from San Francisco north out of the city. So when I talk about the bridge, what I really mean is everything that we're going to talk about over the rest of this year is really a roadmap. And again, it's a roadmap that's going to take us from this land of extraordinary confusion, this land that I call blah, 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 and it's going to take us to a land where I'd like to think that things are going to be much, much clearer. So this is our kind of our fold-out 3-panel roadmap. So over here, we start, and I think many of us, myself especially, are a little bit confused by everything that's going on and how difficult it is to understand. And what I want to do is get us over to this side where we can look at things and we can say, aha, I do understand what's going on. It's clear to me. And the step that's going to be in the middle is what I refer to as this bridge. And this is going to be a set of tools and a set of rules that are going to help us move from one to the other. Very quickly, we've talked about this. We probably, if the fact that you're on the broadcast with me, we're in agreement that there's a tremendous amount of conversation that goes on out there. There's a tremendous amount of information, much of which can be very, very good. But at some point, there gets to be so much that it becomes extremely difficult to know what to listen to and what ideas we should take away. A quick example, of course, of why this happens is because most of us have learned that the proper way to formulate a problem is to go ahead and write it down. And typically writing it down means to go into great detail and make sure that we've covered our problem in a very linear fashion from A to B to C to D and so on until we go from our original statement somewhere up here all the way through our final statement, which is down here. And since that's the way we've learned to state the problem, when we go to try to solve the problem, we feel obligated to solve it in the same way. Again, from A to B to C to D, making sure that we're getting every point exactly right as we go through it and coming up with a nice linear solution. The problem, of course, is that we know that although this is a wonderful way to think, it's not the only way, and it often fails us. In particular, when we get so wrapped up in the verbiage and the words that we have in here, we lose sight. We literally lose sight of the vision of what it was we tried to explain. You might remember at the end of the last broadcast, I ended with an example of some words from the CEO of Condé Nast Publications. So Condé Nast is the largest, one of the largest, if not the largest, publisher of magazines on earth. So among many of the titles, which will be familiar to people around the world, of course there's Vogue magazine, there's Allure magazine, there's Details magazine, there are bridal magazines, Golf Digest, The New Yorker, Architectural Digest, Vanity Fair magazine, Wired magazine, Condé Nast Traveler, etc. So an incredible array of incredibly interesting and exciting information with lots of texts and photographs inside, of course, each one of these magazines. And that's why it was so ironic, I thought, that when the CEO of Condé Nast sent out a memo to all of his staff explaining the reorganization of the company, he was not vivid at all. And in fact, you might recall when I presented this last time we spoke, he ended up writing a memo that became so unclear that almost no one in his own company understood what they were supposed to do. So, not to reiterate the whole thing, just quickly, we remember that it was a lot of text. In July, we announced a strategic refocus, 3 clear priorities: customer-centric, holistic brand management, multi-platform integrated sales and marketing, optimizing brand revenue, shifting responsibility to single-site digital sales, publisher now leveraging, and in the end, we're left asking, what? Okay, I know that there's some meaning in there, but I certainly can't see it. What am I supposed to do? Well, I presented this as your homework last time we talked, and it was Shivanand who sent me in the very first drawing. I appreciate the drawings that all of you sent in, so I thought since Shivanand came in first, let's go ahead and start really quickly with his drawing. So what Shivanand did is, all of you, of course, who've been through any of your cadet training on the Napkin Academy, know that the first thing that we do when we want to create a problem-solving picture is we draw who. And I'm very happy with the fact that Shivanand did exactly that. So he drew readers. And here's a print magazine reader, and here's someone who's reading a magazine on a desktop, and here's someone who's reading a magazine on their tablet PC, and here's someone reading a magazine on their mobile. And then the second thing we do, of course, is we draw how many or how much, and Shivanand's been able to do that. We have 4 different types of readers on 4 different platforms. So what we have here is a picture that it partially explains what the CEO of Condé Nast was describing, which is that we're going to take all of our magazines and we are going to create different platforms that will allow them to continue to be produced in print, that will allow them to be read online, on tablets, and on mobile devices. Now, I think that was part of the message. And Shivanand, I appreciate you starting, but I want to go a little bit further, because what I want to really focus on is what was the essential meaning that I think Chuck Townsend over at Condé Nast was really trying to deliver when he wrote this message. So let's really look at it again. Let's take what Shivanand has done and go a little bit further. So, a strategic refocus. Let's go ahead and itemize. Let's go ahead and highlight some of the terms that we think are important here. And the reason this is important is because the process we're going to go through right now is what I consider the bridge from blah, blah, blah to clarity. We go through and we look for the key terms. There's something here about a strategic refocus. I understand that. Whenever we see a list, 3 clear priorities, our attention should awaken up, because we realize that there's going to be 3 of something to count. That's a nice how much, isn't it? So ensuring future growth and success. And here we go. Here's the 3. A consumer-centric business model, a holistic brand management approach. I don't know what that is, so I'm going to just call it a brand management approach, and establishment of a multi-platform integrated organization. I'm going to get rid of some of the other words just to understand that. A multi-platform integrated organization. Then, to optimize brand revenue, okay, so we want to get our money out of this, we're shifting responsibility for single site to the brands, so publishers can now fully leverage their offerings across all platforms. Here's the way I would draw that. So here I go. I'm going to make a very fast attempt to be vivid myself. So the first thing he said is we have 3 priorities, and they are: priority number 1, consumer-centric business model. So the consumer are who? I am the consumer. The consumer is at the center. Consumer-centric. It's aimed towards the consumer. 2, holistic brand management. So here we have brand management. And holistic, of course, means we take lots of little bits and we pull them together to bring commonality to them. So we loop them together so that we can handle them all at once. And item number 3 was multi-platform integrated sales. And this is what Shivanan had exactly right. Multi-platform means we have magazines, we have PC magazines, we have our mobile magazines. So now we've got multi-platform. So this was item number 3, multi-platform. Okay, so not knowing what the organizational structure of Condé Nast was prior, what it was that Chuck Townsend was trying to change, we have to guess and say, well, whatever it was, it clearly was not as customer-centric as it might have been. It was not holistic, and it was not integrated multi-channel. But now it's going to be. So now we understand that there are 3 priorities. Number 1, focus on the customer. Number 2, make sure that all of our brands work together. And number 3, make sure that we have multiple platforms. Now I'm beginning to understand what was all in all of that blah, blah, blah. This tells me something really interesting though, because if I look at the second part of what Chuck was saying, to optimize brand revenue, we will shift responsibility for single-site digital sales and marketing to the brand level. So what we know is that Condé Nast, as a parent organization, as one big organization, has multiple independent brands underneath it. And these are what we call Vogue and Allure and the New Yorker and Golf Digest and Architectural Digest, etc. So what he's saying is we're shifting responsibility for single-site digital sales and marketing to the brand level. So this tells us that in the past, all of these things, customer-centric, working together, multiple platforms, were handled by the parent company, because what they're now doing is they're pushing it off to the individual brands to be able to take care of their own individual multi-channel platforms. So in the past, if Condé Nast was responsible for all of this, what they're now saying, and this to me was the critical point in his entire memo, and the one that if I was an employee at Condé Nast, I would walk away and say, I understand, is that when he says publishers can now fully leverage their offerings across platform, what he's saying is if I am the publisher of this magazine, let's say this is Golf Digest, and here I am, I'm a golfer. Woohoo! If I'm the golfer, if I'm the publisher of Golf Digest, it now means that instead of relying on Condé Nast to provide these 3 circles, I am now responsible for providing those 3 circles by myself. And all of a sudden I realize that as the publisher of one group, I now know what I need to do. Individually, I need to figure out how Golf Digest brand is going to integrate with the other brands, and I now am going to be responsible for making sure that I individually am delivering all of the various platforms. So that's what I mean by vivid thinking. Visual, which is what I just did on the previous page, verbal, which of course is what Chuck had done on the previous page, and then the ID, as we know, means interdependent thinking. If we activate our visual mind to try to understand what all of these different words mean, what is buried in here, we begin to see an image that looks like this. And if we then wanted to continue the process, we could say, I now know, as the publisher of one particular magazine, very clearly what it is that I am now responsible for doing. So what I'd like to do now for a moment is I want us to take a little test. I am going to share with you the power of our visual mind, why it is so critical that we move away from only words as the way we describe ideas to moving into a mode which is more pictorial. I'm going to share with you 30 images, and I'm going to show them to you in less than half a second each, and what I want you to try to do is remember them. And of course, that's impossible, right? Well, let's go ahead and see. Pay attention to the screen. I'm going to go as fast as I can. Here we go. Stay with me. Focus on the images. We're going to have 30 of them. I just want you to look at the pictures that are here. Okay, there they were. Those were 30 different pictures. Now, I'm going to ask you something. How many of you think that you could remember all 30 of those images? I'm willing to think that having done this test many times in the past, very few of us would think that we could really remember all 30 of those images. We're going to come back to this test before long. I'm going to show you that every one of us is going to remember exactly one of those images. And not only that, we're not only going to remember them in 2 minutes from now, we're actually going to be able to remember them if I went back and did the test for you again 6 or 8 or 9 months from now. The reason this is important is because I want to begin to introduce again the importance of once we make things visual, we make them far more clear, and really importantly, we make them far more memorable. The number one way we remember things is through the images that we see. That's why it's so important when we want to be clear and memorable that we begin to embed images and visual imagery directly into our words. All right, so here we go. The way we're going to do this is 3 steps, 3 rules, and 3 tools. The steps are very simple. We live in a complex, unclear world. We want to go to a place where ideas are vivid. We need to have a bridge to get us there. Those are the 3 steps. The 3 steps are going to help us take advantage at both halves of our mind. A little bit of review here. We know that we've got the verbal part. We know that we've got the visual part. We know that we've become very good at the verbal part. We need to improve our visual part, and together we will then be able to become truly vivid. The 3 rules and the 3 tools. Let's start with the rules. Rule number 1 on how to begin to become vivid. When we say a word, we should draw a picture. Let me live up to my own expectations. When we say a word, we should draw a picture. What verbal plus visual really means is we have learned to think in words. We have the ability also to think in pictures. It's harder for many of us to believe that because we haven't been trained that way. So the practice we're going to do is from now on, when we say a word, we're going to draw a picture. This is rule number 1. Rule number 2, if we don't know which picture to draw, we should look to vivid grammar to show us the way. Vivid grammar is the toolkit that's going to allow us to look at complex sets of words and start to break them down into visual descriptions. That's what vivid grammar is all about. So again, if we don't know which picture to draw, or if the idea is too complicated, what we're going to do is we're going to pass it through vivid grammar, and that will help us get the tools to be able to make it become visual. And now let's look at rule number 3. To make any idea more vivid, we turn to the 7 essentials, otherwise known as the vivid forest. Let's add a picture. We're going to spend a lot of time going through the details of the vivid forest, but here's what I would like you to remember about it now. To make any idea more vivid, when I say that we run them through the vivid forest, here is what I mean. We give our ideas visual form. That's the F. We start our ideas by showing only the essentials. That's the O. We make our ideas recognizable, visually recognizable. That's the R. We make sure that our ideas can evolve. That is, we don't present everything as if it's finished. That's the E. We make sure that our ideas span opposites. That is, they include the thing that's opposite to themselves, which sounds very conceptual, but it's going to turn out to be very important. That's the S. And then finally, we make sure that our ideas are targeted. That is, we know who they're aimed at, and so we know which audience we need to tailor our message towards. Those are the 6 letters, F-O-R-E-S-T, that make up the forest, and the 7th essential idea is that any vivid idea is, of course, both visual and verbal. Before I go into rule number 1, which is where we're going to spend the rest of our time today, I want to go back to that test for a moment. You remember the one where I showed you 30 different images? I'm sure most of us thought that we couldn't remember them. I want to prove to you that we can. I want to prove the power of our visual memory. So here we go. I'm going to run through the same 30 images, but this time I'm going to show a new image beside them. What I'd like you to do on your own is see if you can identify which is an image you already saw and which is the one you did not yet see. So here we go. I hope most of us remember that this is the image that we saw. Next. I'm going to go through each one, and I want you on your own to point to the one that is the one you remember seeing. All I'm going to do by circling them at the end is just show which one it actually was. I'm circling the ones that we did see. I hope you're agreeing with me. I hope you're seeing the same thing. I'm 99.9% sure that you are, because I've given this test many, many times before, and it's remarkable the degree to which we are able to remember the things that we saw. Isn't this remarkable? How much we're able to remember? I showed you these images less than half a second each. There were 30 of them. If I had just stated the items in a list, or if I just read off a list of 30 items, it's highly unlikely we'd be able to remember very many of them all. But in this particular case, I'm sure most of you are agreeing with me, I hope you are, that we can remember extraordinarily quickly what it was that we saw and what were the images that are brand new to us now. That's the end of the 30. Isn't it incredible what we were able to remember? When we want to be clear and convey a lot and make sure that that is memorable, we use our visual mind. Okay, which brings us back to Rule 1, which we're going to put in practice a little bit now. Remember it, when we say a word, we should draw a picture. Here's what I mean. Let's pick a simple word. Let's go ahead and pick a simple word. Let's go ahead and pick a word like ball. What picture would I draw to draw that? Well, how about that? And the act of doing those two things is not the same. Two completely different processing centers working together. So let's say I got more specific. Instead of just ball, let's say I called it a beach ball. Well, how would I do that? Well, could I do something like this? Starts to make my ball look a little bit more like a beach ball. Interesting. You know what? If anybody wants to go ahead, use the chat window, throw me some simple words. Let's see if we can't put this to action. In the meantime, let me give you a couple more words. So let's take a word like sun. Simple words. Of course, what picture might I draw to draw the sun? Okay, someone just put in, Paul, I want to thank you. If I understand you correctly, you gave me the word social. Okay, so social's complicated. Well, how about maybe this is one way to talk about, to represent something about social. Isn't social about a lot of people working together? There's something. How about another word? Let's take one that's maybe a little bit more complicated, not too much. Let's start with simple ones. A word like car. I could say it, and I guess I could probably come up with a pretty simple way to draw a car. And again, you know, I'm not interested in it being beautiful. So those are some simple words. Okay, here's an interesting one that comes from Shiv. How about experience? Okay, that's a tricky one. This is what I get for asking all of you. So let's say experience. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to remember something. Here's what it is. Here's what it is. Let's say I went on a roller coaster. Okay, I'm sure all of us have been on a roller coaster. and it was a tremendous amount of fun. It was quite an experience. Woo! And now what I'm remembering, the experience, is both doing the event and remembering later on what it felt like. So there's an example of another word. The point I want to make here is that it is a very different cognitive experience. A perfect example. To say a word, could be anything, tree, and you'll notice I'm starting with simple nouns, and then to go to the act of conjuring up in my mind's eye, and then with my pen and my paper, what that thing might look like. So this is rule number one. And the reason why this is so important is because, again, we are all so good at the word part. And we're so proud of our ability to be verbal. And what we want to focus on is, again, shifting from only thinking in terms of the words towards thinking about what might be a visual of that. So, they don't all have to be nouns. Most of these are nouns. Could we do some verbs too? Some things, some words that denote action. Well, how about a word like run? How would we show that? Well, okay, for any of you who've watched my stick figure drawings in the cadet class, you know that the way we can make, a word like run is we can go ahead and show us running. How about a more complicated word too? How about a word, an emotional word? How about a word like love? Now, there's probably lots of ways to draw that. I think probably the simplest way, one that we all recognize, is we draw something like a heart. So the point I want to make is this is a practice exercise that I'd like all of us to get into the habit of doing when we can. Simply, this is a way of activating our visual mind from a practical, practice-oriented perspective. Now, these are easy words, but let's be clear. Also some of you have given me some words that are a little more complicated. One that I often stumble on is, I was thinking about it. How might we show a picture of something like progress? This is a word that has a lot of meaning in it. What does progress actually mean? Well, I don't want to just go ahead and say, oh, I know what the word means, type it into my paragraph and say, it's all about making progress. Well, what does that actually mean? One way, if I think about it, is progress indicates that I'm starting in one point. Maybe I'm starting here, and I'm going to go to another point. And along the way, I am going to change myself, or I'm going to change my situation. So here's one. How about something like this? I do something, and then I do a little more, and I do a little more, and I get better at it each time. And over time, what I finally do is I get to another point, and I've learned something new along the way. I have made progress. Now, Paul has given me an interesting one. Okay, here's one. Perseverance. Okay, let's think about that. Perseverance. We all know what the word means, right? We all know that to persevere means to go ahead and keep trying. And let's say this is Sisyphus, okay? Perseverance means to keep trying, to keep going and keep going and keep going. So this is one time I do the thing. I push the rock up the hill. Doesn't show much perseverance, but let's say I did a series of pictures. I hill many times, and I drew over and over again, pushing that rock up the hill again and again. And we could even say that I'm getting unhappier and unhappier each time I do it, and I'm probably getting more and more tired each time I do it. But you know what? I am going to continue to push that rock up that hill, and I am going to overcome how tired I am and how sweaty I am and upset I am, because that's what perseverance means. So here we've got a nice way of visualizing the word perseverance. And we could do this all day, and I obviously have spent years and years trying to develop tools so that when I try to think about what is the meaning of a word, I try to imagine what might be a visual representation of it. I am good at this. Often I stumble too, but what I want to do is I want to shift from me being good at it, I want to help you become very good at this. So instead of saying, here's a difficult word we can't draw, here's a word we can draw. Now, Paul just came up with another, a new word from Paul, the word neat. And Paul, I'm going to take that I hope as a compliment for the picture that we just drew. But at the same time, we could even draw a picture for the word neat, couldn't we? Because we could say this will be a contrasting picture. We could say that often things start out kind of like this, and that is not very neat. But here's another way to put it. And now it's neat. So not this, but this. It's a really good way to do it. And hey, this is something, thanks, Paul. It was a compliment, not a test. I can't stop once I get going on these things. Hey, for anybody who's interested in this rule number 1 exercise, when we say a word, draw a picture. I don't know if any of you know about this, but there is a really nice application out there for anybody who's got a mobile device, iPhone, iPad, Android, etc., called Draw Something. I may have mentioned this in my last session and I don't even remember. Draw Something is a really nice app that allows you to draw pictures shared socially drawing pictures in order to get excellent practice at this. So that's what rule number 1 was all about. And that's as far as we're going to go today. Rule number 1, when we think of a word, I want us to start getting into the practice of drawing a picture. Now, there's going to be 3 tools. I told you there were 3 rules. I've introduced them. There are going to be 3 tools that are going to help us as we start to think through how to turn words into pictures. We will introduce these tools over the remaining sessions over the coming weeks. The 3 tools. Tool number 1 is, again, something we're going to call the Blahmeter. The Blahmeter is the way that we measure the meaning of our words. So the assumption I'm going to make is that most of us, most of the time, start out when we're thinking, we start out with our ideas because we've been taught to do this as words. And what the Blahmeter is going to help us do is understand whether our own words or the words of someone else are clear or boring or foggy or misleading. So that's what the Blahmeter is going to do. It's going to help us be honest about our own words or the words we hear from other people. Tool number 2 is going to be vivid grammar. Vivid grammar is the main tool that we're going to use. Remember rule number 2? The tools line up to the rules. Rule number 2 said if we don't know which picture to draw, we refer to vivid grammar. Well, this is vivid grammar, and we're going to go through this in tremendous detail. A little preview. It says there are essentially 6 types of pictures that we're going to learn to need how to draw, because there are really 6 different types of ideas that structurally we are able to think about from a language perspective. So what we're going to do with vivid grammar is say, instead of creating an entirely new grammar for visuals, we're going to seize upon existing grammar of the English language. And what we're going to do with it is we're going to use the basis of English grammar as a way to come up with a way to start drawing pictures of anything that we can talk about. And then, of course, tool number 3, the one we touched on briefly, the vivid forest, form, only essentials, recognizable, evolving, spans opposites, and targeted. Those combine to make verbal and visual ideas become very vivid. So that's an introduction to the tools. And with that, I want to give you your homework assignment until the next time that we meet. Since I haven't given you the tools yet in any detail, all I want you to work on for the next 2 weeks is rule number 1. When we say a word, we should draw a picture. And this is just for practice, so I want to keep this as simple as it can be. Here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to make a list of 10 words. Pick 10 words of your own. 3 nouns, so persons, places, or things. 3 adjectives that describe one of your nouns. So let's say one of my nouns was a boat, one of my nouns was a box, and one of my nouns was a flower. Now what I want you to do is for one of your nouns, I want you to pick 3 adjectives. So in this case, I could call it, it's a blue flower, it's a small flower, and it smells nice. Nice smelling. Okay, so there are 3 adjectives, and then I want you to pick 3 verbs, and then I want you to pick 1 sentence. And they don't have to be related. The verbs and the adjectives and the nouns in the sentence do not have to be related. But I want you to pick those things, 10 altogether. I recognize the sentence contains many words, so this isn't entirely accurate, but it's nicer to say 10 words. And then I want you to draw them. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. And again, the main focus was on that rule number 1. When we say a word, let's start focusing on drawing pictures. This is what's going to help us move away. This becomes the bridge. It's going to begin to get us from a world of complexity into a world of clarity.
Hey, thank you all for another great lesson. This is Dan signing off from the Napkin Academy, but don't go away. Now on our new platform, you can still submit your homework. Debbie, our community manager, is going to join you right now to show you exactly how to do that. And I really encourage you, do your homework. Okay, take it away, Debbie. See you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this Napkin Academy classic video. We've made it easier than ever to share your homework. After you've completed your homework and have a JPEG or PNG file saved on your computer, come back to this course. Once you're back here, scroll to the bottom of the screen, and in the comments box, you can add a comment. I'm just going to call this one My Homework. You can also add images by clicking on the Insert Edit Image button here. In the source box, click on the file. In the Images window, click on Upload, and then click on Add Files. This is going to take you to your computer where you can search for your images. I'm just going to search for mine in Pictures, and I'm going to choose this image here. You can also add multiple images here. Click Upload. After the upload is complete, click Close. Then scroll down, and you'll see that the last image is here, and it's checked. This is the one we just uploaded. Click Insert. I suggest in the Dimensions box you change the maximum to 1200 pixels and leave the Constrained Proportions box checked. You can also add an image description here if you'd like. Click OK. You'll see that your image has been added to your comment. And now the last step, the most important one, make sure that you click the green comment button here to upload your homework to the Napkin Academy. We hope to see your homework soon.